Fantastic. Sorry, you didn't expect me to be in Texas and not have a glass of wine in my hand. Well, I have a glass of wine in my hand. Lovely, rich. And now this one's actually, this is called, what's it called? Prairie roti or whatever it is. Yes, good idea. Prairie roti, yes, I've got it. These are Rhone Valley varieties. These are Grenache, Syrah, Mourvèdre, these kind of things. Now I have to say, I've come to Texas and I'm completely delighted to be here because I've actually been tasting Texas wines, you won't believe this, but for 20 years. But now I finally get down and dirty with. To understand Texas wines, you actually can't do it from the greater world. Firstly, because you never send us any wines. Now, I understand that. From what I can make out, you drink all your own wines. That's fine. And I'm delighted that I've actually managed to get a few bottles you haven't drunk yourselves. But this makes, it's a good and a bad thing. If you drink all your own wines, you don't really care what the rest of the wine world thinks about you because, of course, we never see your wines. Now, if you want us to actually judge your wines and say, how do you stand in the world of wine? Well, you A, have to send us some of your wines, but B, this is an important point. Maybe you have to start trying to make wines which are not just made to please an easy local market. In Texas, you've got what, 3 of the biggest cities in the whole of the United States in Texas? Now those are 3 massive markets. I suspect that it's easy to sell anything you make, probably to, if you want to, an undiscriminating market, so therefore you can make cheap wine. I suspect that you can make cheap wines and sell them relatively cheaply to a relatively undiscriminating market, which is just drinking Texas wines, and everyone's happy and everyone has a few dollars in the pocket. Well, that's not how you make yourself a world player. If you want to be a world player, you actually have to say, I accept we have a local market. If the local market only wants something slightly sweet, slightly soft, slightly easy, slightly gentle, and only $10 a bottle, okay, live with that local market or come to something more global, because the wines that you make in Texas for your local market, I think there's lots of very nice, gentle, undemanding wines, but nice, gentle, undemanding is not the way you're going to make yourself famous in the rest of the world. It may be that you don't want to. Frankly, if Texas is everywhere I go around in Texas, they say we're going to secede, we're going to secede. Well, frankly, you're big enough and you're successful enough, you probably could. You actually don't need the rest of the world. You're probably perfectly happy doing what you do. I have tasted some wines today though, which are world class. There's a Vermentino I tasted. Now that's a really exciting, snappy, sort of zesty kind of style of wine from Italy, and one might say, hey, nobody's heard of it, we can't grow that. Well, look, if you're going to fret about no one's heard of it, we can't grow it, if that's going to be your sort of inward looking view, don't ask me whether you can make it in the wider world, because it's clearly not important enough to you. If you want to make it in the wider world, the global market, and honestly, you don't have to, but if you do want to, You can't just think to yourself, we do Sauvignon, hey, other people do it better. We do Chardonnay, well, frankly, other people do it better. We do Cabernet Sauvignon, hey, you make some nice stuff, but other people do it better. We do Merlot, hey, you know, a lot of other people do it better. So you should start saying, isn't there some way that we, the great grand, you know, the massive new world state, the one-star state, the proud state, why is this proud state saying we must do something a bit French here? Well, very French. We must try and do all the French classics. Texas is not Bordeaux. Texas isn't Burgundy. I mean, I've rarely come to a place less like Burgundy than here. So Chardonnay, well, you can make some nice Chardonnays. In fact, I've had a very, very nice High Plains Chardonnay, unoaked, by the way, unoaked. The idea is that well, you've got to be in a warm place. I mean, hey, I'm Irish. I come from a place where the sun shines about 4 days a year, and I presume you're in a warm place. But look, you're also in a most unusual place for the Northern Hemisphere. You are in an unusual, unpredictable kind of wine growing place. Well, Chardonnay, luckily, is a very malleable variety. And I have seen some wine from the High Plains, which I thought was really, really nice. Unoaked. Find that variety, use something with it. And this was unoaked with 1.7% Viognier put in there. That's really intelligent winemaking, because you only need a couple of percent of Viognier. Just think of it. You've got a steak. You put on some salt. You put on some pepper. It transforms the flavour. Now, is that salt and pepper 1% of what you got on your plate? No, it's 0.1. It's 0.01. That's what you can do with Viognier. Viognier is a wonderful, wonderful way to season slightly less interesting grapes. And I thought that unoaked Chardonnay with a tiny bit of Viognier was a really good idea. Now, I know that you're saying to yourselves, we're famous for Viognier. Well, I would say that I've tasted several wines, of Viognier wines today. I've also tasted quite a lot of Viognier wines from further north, places like Virginia. So you are not alone in making tremendous Viognier wines. Viognier is a difficult sell. The world is not going to rush to your door saying, please, can I have Viognier? But again, it's a case of, what do you want to do? You know, you Texan guys, you're supposed to be full of self-confidence. You're supposed to say, anything the world can do, we can do better. And yet, quite a lot of your winemaking lacks spirit. Quite a lot of your winemaking seems to me to be safe, conservative, just sort of doing what works. As I've said before, if that's what you're happy with, you've got Dallas, Fort Worth, you've got Houston, you've got Austin. If you can just sell in all those places, you don't have to sell any further. Look into your hearts. Look into your soul. What do you want to do? Do you want to be world players? Do you want to be local players? If you want to be local players, you can stick with your Sauvignon Blancs, you can stick with your Chardonnays, you can stick with your Cabernets, you can stick with your sugary pink wines. That's not a problem. You can make wines which are gentle and easy. You do that quite well. If you want to be global players, then you've got to start thinking, what is it about Texas that is different? Now, from what I've seen, Texas is a tough place. I was in a hotel this morning and there was the news on. Lots of interesting stuff happening. But there was another television screen over there which was the Weather Channel. everyone was watching the Weather Channel. Eventually, I watched the Weather Channel. I decided, oh, I'm not too bothered about, you know, the fact that France is in revolution, as usual, by the way, nothing special there. That England has cut half the jobs in the world, and we're all going to sink in the North Sea. That President Obama is doing this and that and the other. No, no, no. What mattered was I was getting precise news as to where the weather was going to be all over Texas. The typhoon here, the monsoon here, the cyclone there, the hurricane there. I tell you, you know, if you got me after breakfast today, I could have given you a precise exposition of where to go and where not to go in Texas today. Well, I've never seen a vineyard area with so much climatic stress as yours. I think you need to think to yourselves, we need grapes which can cope with that. I suspect that you should spend less time worrying about the French classic grapes, because they're actually mollycoddly kind of grapes. Why don't you look more towards Portugal, look more towards the white grapes, the white grapes of Italy, the white grapes of Italy. Those are going to be some of the greatest white grapes in the next 10 years. You're perfectly placed for those. The Spanish grapes, yes indeed, not just Tempranillo, try Garnacha. The whole range of Portuguese grapes there. You've actually got loads and loads of potential, but it's not the typical potential. You can't say to yourself, we're going to be the new California. You're not. You can't say, we're going to be the new Bordeaux. We're not. You're not. The one thing you can be, and the one thing the world is going to thank you for, is going to say, hey, we're Texas.